Presley's family are fighting hard to keep his iconic mansion Graceland off the real estate market. Its sale was scheduled.
When the FBI stepped into Graceland after Elvis Presley's death, the air in that mansion was already heavy with grief. But what happened next turned sorrow into shock. Behind the velvet curtains, past the hallways the public never saw, agents approached the one place Elvis had guarded more than any other, his private upstairs bedroom. Everyone in Elvis's world knew that this room was untouchable. Even close friends, even trusted family, rarely entered without his permission. It was his fortress of solitude, a space where the king of rock and roll could strip away the rhinestones, the lights, the burden of being larger than life. But on this day, the government had authority, and with it came the cold determination to uncover anything the king might have left behind. At first, the search looked ordinary. Papers on his desk, clothes neatly folded, medicines lined up by the bed, familiar, heartbreaking reminders of a man whose body gave out far too soon. But then, an agent noticed something odd. Against the far wall, the paint looked slightly different. The paneling didn't sit flush, as though it had been tampered with years earlier, the kind of detail most would overlook. Yet to trained eyes, it screamed of something hidden. The family members who stood nearby, already exhausted from mourning, watched in confusion as the agents tapped the wall, listening for hollows. The sound changed from solid wood to an empty echo. A murmur spread through the room. Something was concealed back there, and whatever it was, Elvis had gone to great lengths to keep it that way. The order was given. Tools were brought in. Slowly, carefully, the paneling began to loosen. Priscilla, though separated from Elvis at the time of his death, had come back to Graceland to help protect Lisa Marie and to witness what would unfold. Her face, normally composed, showed a flicker of fear. What would they find? Another stash of jewelry? Hidden cash? Or something far more disturbing? The agents worked methodically, prying away at wood that had sealed its secrets for years. Each crack of splintering timber echoed through the room like a drumbeat. For those who loved Elvis, every sound was unbearable, like tearing open the last piece of him they thought was still private. And then, finally, the space revealed itself. A hollow chamber, no bigger than a small closet, opened up behind the bedroom wall. Dust rose in the air, proof that no one had touched this place in decades. The agents peered in first. Their faces shifted, surprise, then disbelief, and something colder. Whatever they had uncovered wasn't trivial. It wasn't just keepsakes or forgotten belongings. It was something that demanded official attention. For the family, those next few moments stretched like hours. Silence hung heavy. No one moved. No one dared ask the question, though every heart was pounding with the same thought. What could Elvis have hidden here that required the FBI? Lisa Marie, still young, clung to her mother's side, unaware of the magnitude of what was happening, but sensitive to the tension in the air. For Priscilla, the shock ran deeper. She had spent years alongside Elvis, through love and turbulence, through fame and disillusionment. She thought she knew the man better than anyone, and yet here she was, staring at a secret wall she had never even realized existed. The agents began carefully removing items from the hidden compartment, folders stacked thick with papers, containers that looked sealed for years, personal objects whose meaning was impossible to read at first glance. One by one, they laid them out, their gloved hands precise, their expressions unreadable. The Presley family could only watch in silence. Each item pulled from the wall seemed to chip away at the image of Elvis they thought they knew. The glamorous star, the devoted father, the generous friend, suddenly all of it felt incomplete. Because now there was evidence that Elvis had been carrying a secret life, one he had gone to extraordinary lengths to bury, even within his own sanctuary. By the time the chamber was emptied, the weight of discovery had settled on everyone in the room. The family didn't speak. The FBI didn't explain. But the look in the agents' eyes told the truth. What they had found wasn't ordinary. It wasn't harmless. It was the kind of material that could change reputations, stir controversies, and shatter myths. The king of rock and roll had left behind more than music, more than legend. He had left walls inside walls, secrets hidden in plain sight, and a mystery so profound that even his own family stood speechless. And this was only the beginning. because what those agents carried out of Graceland that day would go on to raise questions that still echo decades later about who Elvis truly was, what he feared, and why he chose to hide so much of himself from the world. To understand why Elvis Presley might have gone to such lengths to conceal part of his life, you have to step back and look at the man behind the crown. Because for all the glittering jumpsuits, flashing lights, and screaming crowds, Elvis lived with a single relentless truth. The world never stopped watching him. From the moment he walked onto the stage in the 1950s, Elvis became a prisoner of his own fame. Every gesture, every word, every movement was dissected by the press, the fans, and the machine that profited from his image. His home at Graceland was meant to be the one place where the world couldn't reach him. Yet even there, the weight of scrutiny lingered. His walls weren't just physical, they were psychological. They represented his desperate need to keep parts of himself untouched, unseen, and unexploited. Those closest to him often described him as two men. There was the Elvis the world adored, the electrifying showman who made audiences faint with a smile. And then there was the Elvis who sat alone at night, restless, searching for peace in a life that felt anything but peaceful. He feared betrayal because he had seen it too often. Friends turned opportunists, employees who sold stories, even some family members who leaked to tabloids. For Elvis, trust was a fragile currency, and he guarded it fiercely. It wasn't unusual for him to create hiding places. He had secret drawers, private safes, and ways of stashing away things he didn't want others to see. Sometimes it was just jewelry or guns he collected obsessively. Other times it was letters, notes, and personal writings that revealed his doubts and regrets. To Elvis, these weren't just possessions, they were fragments of his real self, pieces of a man that the cameras could never capture. The obsession with secrecy also grew from fear. By the late 1960s and into the 1970s, Elvis had seen the darker side of fame. Government agencies monitored celebrities who held influence. The FBI and other institutions kept files on musicians, fearing the cultural sway they had over a restless generation. Elvis, with his blend of gospel faith, Southern pride, and unpredictable moods, wasn't immune from paranoia. He sometimes spoke about people out to get him, convinced that unseen forces were watching. But the irony is that Elvis also courted that same surveillance. He offered to work with law enforcement. He collected police badges. He felt safest surrounded by men who carried guns. His desire for control over his world meant building both literal and symbolic barriers. If the world could never fully know him, then at least he could keep parts of himself safe. The family had long accepted this side of him. They knew he valued privacy above everything. Lisa Marie, even as a child, understood that her father's upstairs world was sacred. Few were allowed to cross the threshold. Even Priscilla, who had shared years of her life with him, admitted that Elvis was at times unknowable. He let people close enough to see the image, but rarely close enough to touch the truth. That is why when the FBI uncovered a hidden chamber in his bedroom wall, it shook them so deeply. It wasn't just about the contents, it was about what it meant. It confirmed that Elvis had been concealing something even from those who thought they knew him best. It wasn't paranoia without reason. It was deliberate. It was his way of taking back control in a life where so much had been stolen by others. The silence in that room wasn't only about shock, it was about recognition. They realized that this wasn't just Elvis the superstar leaving behind material possessions. This was Elvis the man, deliberately drawing a line between the world he performed for and the world he tried to protect. A reminder that the king of rock and roll lived in constant tension between exposure and secrecy. For the family, the fear grew heavier. If Elvis had hidden something behind a wall, what else had he hidden? What other truths lay buried in the life they thought they shared with him? And most of all, what did these secrets say about the man he truly was? The answer would come soon enough as the FBI began to sift through what they had pulled out of that compartment. And the reaction it sparked would leave those who loved him, not to mention the entire world, completely speechless. The air inside Graceland grew heavier as the FBI laid the first stack of folders on Elvis's bed. Dust clung to their covers, the kind that takes decades to form. The agents handled them with precision, flipping through pages thick with typewritten lines, handwritten notes, and official stamps that made the family's hearts sink. This wasn't memorabilia. These were documents that carried weight, authority, and consequence. The first file revealed surveillance reports, pages upon pages of names, dates, and coded references. The handwriting on the margins looked unmistakably like Elvis's own. He had been keeping records, tracking conversations, and compiling information in a way that suggested more than paranoia. It was as though he'd been building his own archive, one that overlapped with the government's gaze. Priscilla's face paled. She had known about Elvis's fascination with law enforcement, his strange pride in collecting police badges, his belief that he was part of some larger mission. But this was different. These were not souvenirs. They were dossiers, some marked with classifications that only federal hands should have touched. The realization sank in. Elvis hadn't just been hiding his fears. He had been hiding his involvement in something far more complicated. Then came the recordings, old reels stored in metal canisters, some labeled, some left blank. An agent held one up, noting dates that corresponded with pivotal years in Elvis's career. Nobody in the room dared to speculate what might be on them. Could they have been private jam sessions, personal confessions, or conversations Elvis never intended anyone else to hear? Whatever their content, the sheer secrecy behind their storage was enough to leave the Presley family speechless. Among the items were letters written in Elvis's own hand, but not the kind his fans would recognize. These weren't love notes or song lyrics. They were reflections, fragments of thought that carried a darker edge. He wrote about being watched. He wrote about feeling used, about the empire built on his back but out of his control. He scribbled questions that revealed a man wrestling with identity. Was he Elvis the performer or just Elvis the commodity? For Priscilla, reading even a line of his handwriting in that context was devastating. She had shared his bed, his home, his triumphs and heartbreaks, yet here was proof that entire worlds of fear and suspicion had been kept from her. Lisa Marie, too young to fully grasp it at the time, would grow up to inherit not just her father's name, but the weight of these revelations. And then, perhaps most shocking of all, the agents pulled out a small lockbox. Inside were envelopes thick with cash, foreign currencies, and documents that hinted at hidden financial accounts. It wasn't just the existence of money, it was where it led. Trails suggested dealings beyond the familiar circle of Colonel Parker and the record companies. Whispers of offshore holdings, names connected to business figures whose reputations were anything but clean. The family watched in silence as each new layer of the hidden cachet unraveled another part of the man they thought they knew. The king of rock and roll wasn't just a singer caught in the machinery of fame. He had been quietly, perhaps desperately, trying to protect himself from forces real or imagined. And in doing so, he left behind a paper trail that blurred the line between vulnerability and conspiracy. The agents exchanged glances, careful not to reveal too much, but their silence spoke louder than words. Whatever this discovery meant, it extended far beyond Graceland's walls. For Elvis's family, the shock was not just about what was found, it was about what it implied. The king had spent his final years building secret defenses, waging private battles that those closest to him never fully saw. The question that hung in the room was haunting. If Elvis felt the need to hide all of this, what did he know that others didn't? And why, even in his most private sanctuary, did he believe the walls themselves needed to hold his secrets? The agents gathered the files, the tapes, the lockbox, and prepared to take them away. The family was left with nothing but silence, and the sinking realization that Elvis Presley's life was far more complicated, far more dangerous than the legend they had grown up believing. And yet, the deeper mystery remained. Because even as the FBI carried out boxes from that hidden chamber, one truth became clear. They hadn't explained everything. What they had chosen to reveal and what they had chosen to keep sealed were two very different things, and that silence would only feed the fire of conspiracy and speculation for decades to come. When the FBI's boxes left Graceland that day, they didn't just carry papers, tapes, and money. They carried away the illusion that Elvis Presley's life had ever been simple. For his family, the shock was not only in what had been hidden, but in the realization that even after his death, Elvis remained an enigma, both a man and a myth, both vulnerable and untouchable. The story of what lay behind his bedroom wall spread quickly. Not in official press releases, those details were hushed, guarded, but in whispers, in speculation, in carefully leaked fragments. Fans who had worshipped him as the flawless king now wondered if his crown had always rested on secrets. Some clung to the legend, insisting Elvis was protecting himself from exploitation. Others saw darker shadows, imagining webs of corruption or hidden truths too dangerous to share. What was undeniable, though, was the way it reshaped his legacy. Elvis had always been larger than life, a figure who blurred the lines between the stage and reality. But now he was also something else. A man who understood the cost of being exposed, a man who chose to build walls even in his own sanctuary. Those close to him began to re-examine their memories. The moments when Elvis seemed distant, lost in thought. The nights when he spoke vaguely about enemies or betrayals. The obsessive way he collected badges and aligned himself with authority as though craving protection he could never quite secure. All of it now made a different kind of sense. Elvis wasn't only performing for his audience, he was protecting himself from forces that terrified him, whether real or imagined. And so his life became a paradox. On stage, he gave everything. He exposed his heart in every song, every movement, every trembling note of gospel or blues. But off stage, he concealed, he locked away, he mistrusted. The very walls of Graceland became a reflection of the man himself, open to millions on the outside, but sealed tight within. The family, meanwhile, faced a dilemma. What should be told and what should remain hidden? Should Elvis be remembered as the generous, loving father and iconic performer, untouched by suspicion? Or should the truth, the fears, the files, the hidden cash be allowed to complicate his legend? For Priscilla, the answer seemed to lie somewhere in between. She spoke often of his humanity, his flaws, his longing for authenticity. Yet even she never revealed the full weight of what had been discovered. In the decades that followed, these hidden truths became part of Elvis's myth. They added layers of intrigue, feeding documentaries, books, and conspiracies. Some claimed the FBI had removed evidence that tied Elvis to secret government missions. Others believed the files proved he was being targeted, his paranoia rooted in reality. Still others insisted the real Elvis had staged his death, and the hidden chamber was part of the elaborate cover-up. Each theory, each whisper, kept Elvis alive in a way, because the more questions that surrounded him, the less final his death seemed. His legend didn't end at Graceland, it evolved, haunted by the mysteries behind those walls. And maybe that is what Elvis would have wanted. To remain unknowable, to remain larger than one story, one truth, one revelation. The secrets didn't diminish him, they deepened him. They showed that behind the glitter and glory was a man who wrestled with fear, who longed for control, who left behind puzzles no one could solve. The king of rock and roll was never just about music. He was about the collision of power and vulnerability, spectacle and secrecy, love and loneliness. And the chamber in his bedroom wall, with its papers and tapes and money, wasn't an accident. It was a symbol of the walls he carried in his own soul. Elvis gave his audience almost everything. But the parts he held back, the fears, the secrets, the truths no one could touch, may be the reason his story still fascinates the world. Because every discovery, every mystery only proves one thing. Elvis Presley will never be fully known. He will always be both legend and man, both king and prisoner of his own myth. And that is the legacy of hidden truths. If you were Elvis's family, would you want those hidden walls exposed or sealed forever? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more untold stories that reveal the human behind the legend, hit subscribe and join us for the next chapter in music history's deepest secrets.